They say love blinds you. But what no one warns you about is how that blindness doesn't fade all at once. It happens slowly, like fog lifting from a battlefield, revealing the wreckage you didn't know was yours. And by the time I saw David for who he truly was, I wasn't the girl who fell in love with him. I was the woman planning his downfall. This is how I set up fake dates for my cheating boyfriend, and watched him ruin himself, one heartbreak at a time. When I met David 8 years ago, I thought he was everything I'd ever wanted in a man. He was attentive, charming, funny in that effortless way that makes you feel like you're in on a secret. He listened to me, not just to reply, but like he was memorizing me. We met at a coastal art exhibit my best friend had dragged me to. I remember the warm smell of sea air, the echo of waves through the open gallery doors. He stood in front of a watercolor painting, a small island, surrounded by endless blue, and said, "Doesn't it look like freedom?" That was David. Always saying things that made ordinary moments sound like poetry. By the second date, I was hooked. By the third, I was in love. And by the second month, I was already imagining a future with him. He was almost too good to be true. He remembered everything, the kind of wine I liked, the way I took my coffee, my favorite song, even the story about my dad teaching me to fish when I was 9. He said he wanted to know everything about me, and I let him. I told him about my past heartbreaks, my insecurities, the way I sometimes doubted my own worth. He called me beautiful in a way that sounded like he meant it. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Now I know that what he did back then has a name: love bombing. It's when someone drowns you in affection until you mistake intensity for intimacy. And then, they start to pull it all away. But back then, I didn't know that. I just thought I'd found the man of my dreams. 2 months into dating, he invited me on a trip. He said he wanted to show me something special, a piece of his soul, he called it. We drove 2 hours along the coast, the world rolling past in gold and blue. When we arrived, he took me to a tiny marina where a small boat waited his boat, he said proudly. We sailed for half an hour, the wind tangling my hair, his hand steady on the wheel. And then, just as the horizon opened up, I saw it, a small, uninhabited island, the kind you only see in postcards. He anchored close to shore, helped me climb down, and carried a picnic basket up the beach. Inside were homemade sandwiches, fresh fruit, and a bottle of limoncello he said he'd made himself. We ate, we laughed, we swam. At one point, he dove beneath the surface and came back up, holding a giant shell that was smooth, pink, and shimmering in the sun. He handed it to me and said, "For when you need to remember this day." It was the kind of moment that brands itself onto your heart. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself I was safe. I told myself he was the one. A few weeks later, he invited me to his childhood home. It was a quiet house on a hill, filled with dusty photo frames and fading wallpaper. He showed me pictures of his parents, both of whom were gone now, he said softly, and a box of his old toys. He pulled out a small wooden airplane and said, "This one was my favorite. I want you to have it." I remember holding it in my hands, overwhelmed. That kind of trust, that kind of intimacy, it felt sacred. And I fell even deeper. But what I didn't realize then was that everything he gave me a test. A performance. A lure. At first, the changes were small. Barely noticeable, like cracks forming in glass. He'd make small, cutting remarks, jokes that landed too hard. Once, when I put on a dress I loved, he smirked and said, "Cute. But it'd look better if you lost a few pounds." He'd flirt with other women at bars, not enough to cross a line, but enough to make me feel crazy for noticing. And every time I called him out, he'd smile and say, "Don't be jealous, Katie. You're my girl." Then he'd pull me close, whisper apologies, make love to me like he was trying to erase my doubts. And I'd forgive him. Every single time. It became a pattern, his cruelty and my forgiveness dancing in circles until I didn't know which way was up. I wasn't the confident woman I used to be. I was a shadow. And the worst part? I thought that was love. One night, I came out of the shower and saw his laptop open on the couch. Curious, I glanced over and froze. He was on a dating site. Not scrolling out of boredom, Not just browsing, he was messaging women. When I confronted him, he didn't even flinch. He said, "I wanted to see if you'd get jealous. You've been distant lately." That's when I realized he wasn't just careless. He wanted me to see it. He wanted to test me. I told myself I'd leave. But when you're deep in something toxic, your logic doesn't work the same way. You start bargaining with pain. You convince yourself that things can still go back to the way they were. A week later, I remembered something. Early in our relationship, David had asked for my help setting up an online chess account. He was terrible with computers and got frustrated halfway through. "I'll never remember this password," he complained. I laughed and said, "Then just tell me what you want it to be, and I'll write it down for you." He told me. I remembered. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, the memory hit me like a spark. The same username. The same password. Could he really be that careless? My heart pounded as I typed it into the dating site. Username. Password. Enter. The screen blinked. And then, suddenly, there it was. His account. His messages. His lies lay out in black and white. He wasn't just talking to other women. He was meeting them. Sleeping with them. And worse, he was talking about me. Mocking me. Telling strangers the most intimate details of our relationship. My fears, my insecurities. Twisting them into punchlines. My throat closed. My hands shook. I couldn't even cry at first. I just sat there, staring at the wreckage of what I thought was love. And then the tears came, hard and endless. I cried until I couldn't breathe. Until my face hurt. Until the only thing left in me was silence. That's when something inside me shifted. The girl who had loved David, the one who believed in his soft words and bright eyes, she broke that night. But from the pieces, something new started to form. Someone colder. Smarter. Sharper. And she had a plan. I closed his laptop slowly, wiped my tears, and stared at the dark window reflection staring back at me. I didn't recognize myself anymore. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't begging for love. I wasn't apologizing for existing. I wasn't waiting for him to change. I was going to make him pay. And I knew exactly where to start. The night I discovered everything, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the glow from my laptop still flickering in my mind. Every message, every lie, every woman, they replayed like a film I couldn't turn off. And in between the pain came clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw things or show up at his door demanding answers. David fed on chaos. He loved watching me unravel. No. I was going to let him walk straight into a storm of his own making. Calmly. Silently. Beautifully. And the first strike would come from behind a screen. I made myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. My reflection looked different now, my eyes darker, my face sharper. I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. But maybe that was the point. I created a new email, a new photo, a new name. Something soft. Something he'd like. I called her Emily. Emily was 27, into art, hiking, and deep conversations about human nature. She worked in marketing, liked whiskey, and said she found honesty attractive, a little irony for the universe. And then I uploaded a profile picture, not of me, but close enough to catch his eye. Same hair color, same general vibe. Someone he'd think he could mold again. I found her on a royalty-free site, adjusted the lighting, and added a touch of grain to make it look authentic. And when I was done, Emily felt real. Too real. I took a deep breath and found David's dating profile. His smug face stared back at me, that half smile he used when he thought he was smarter than everyone else. Looking for someone honest, adventurous, and spontaneous, his bio said. I almost laughed. Then I clicked message. Hey there. You look familiar. Maybe it's just that smile. I hit send. My heart raced. The hunt had begun. He replied within 5 minutes. I'll take that as a compliment. I'd remember a face like yours though. It was almost funny, the same lines, the same rhythm, the same tricks he used on me years ago. I watched him perform, thinking he was in control, while I sat on the other side of the screen, pulling every string. Over the next few days, we talked. About music. About travel. About the way people sometimes pretend to be better than they are. He said he was tired of games. I almost choked on my coffee reading that. He flirted like a pro, charming, confident, just a touch of vulnerability. If I hadn't known him, I might have fallen for it again. But I knew better now. And every time he sent a message, I could almost hear his voice in my head, rehearsing the words like lines in a play. He didn't love. He performed. So I became the audience he deserved, quiet, smiling, waiting for the final act. After a week, he asked me out. Let's grab a drink. There's this new place by the waterfront, great atmosphere, even better cocktails. My heart thudded. This was it. I typed. Maybe. I'm a little shy about meeting new people. I've had bad luck before. He replied instantly. You can trust me. That was the line that broke me once before. Now it just made me smirk. I agreed to meet him at 5 p.m. on a Thursday at a cafe I knew well. Not too public, not too intimate. Perfect for watching someone's world start to wobble. 10 minutes before the meeting, I called him from my real number. He answered, cheerful, casual, like nothing had ever been wrong between us. Hey babe, can I call you later? I've got to run an errand. My chest tightened. He still called me babe. Sure, I said quietly. Talk later. I hung up and watched the door. He arrived right on time. Same leather jacket. Same confident stride. He sat at a corner table, checked his phone, and looked around expectantly. I was sitting 3 tables behind him, half hidden by a plant, wearing sunglasses and a scarf pulled high. My heart pounded so hard it felt like everyone could hear it. He waited. 10 minutes. 15. He ordered a drink, scrolled his phone. Then a woman walked in, long brown hair, green coat, roughly the same build as Emily. He perked up immediately, stood, and walked straight to her. I watched his lips move, his fake smile forming. But she looked confused, uncomfortable. After a few words, she frowned, shook her head, and stepped away. He followed her halfway to the door before she snapped something sharp and left. The cafe fell silent for a moment. David looked around, embarrassed, then went back to his seat and waited another half-hour before leaving. I watched him go, my hands trembling, not with sadness this time, but adrenaline. It worked. That night, I messaged him again as Emily. Hey, sorry about today. I got cold feet. I saw you but panicked. You're just really handsome and I wasn't sure how to act. He replied within seconds. It's okay, don't worry. You owe me a coffee though, winking face. Of course, he forgave her. His ego needed it. I let him feel safe. Then I planned the next date. And the next. Each time, I changed the profile picture slightly, a different hairstyle, a different city, a different name. Sophie. Claire. Lily. Hannah. Each one was a new woman, carefully designed from the fragments of what he desired. Each one mirrored the fantasy he tried to sell me. And each one would disappoint him. Sometimes I let him wait for hours. Sometimes I made him drive across town only for plans to change. Sometimes I let him believe a woman liked him, really liked him, before she vanished. 10 times. 10 failures. Every single one. He became paranoid, frustrated, bitter. He started venting on his profile, sick of flakes, looking for something real. He even deleted and recreated his account twice, changing his photo like it would somehow change his luck. He didn't know that every new woman he messaged was me. Every rejection, every humiliation, me. And each time, when he came back to me in real life, pretending everything was normal, I'd smile. I'd ask how his day went. I'd kiss him on the cheek, knowing exactly where he'd been. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient. And patience, I realized, is the sharpest form of revenge. One night, after another failed date, he came home furious. He slammed the door, muttering under his breath. What's wrong? I asked sweetly from the couch. Nothing. People are just fake. I smiled. Yeah, I said softly. They really are. He didn't even notice. By the 10th date, I knew it was time. He was unraveling, snapping at me over small things, quieter than usual, clearly confused about why the world suddenly seemed against him. I decided the final act would be public. No yelling, no tears. Just truth, sharp and simple. We met at a cafe where he'd taken me on our first date. He ordered us wine, like always, trying to charm his way through the tension he didn't yet understand. I waited until he smiled. Then I said, "It's over, David." He blinked. "What?" "I know about the women. The messages. The dates." He scoffed, laughed nervously, and tried to gaslight me. "You're being paranoid again, Katie. You're imagining things." I looked him straight in the eye. "All those failed dates?" Pause. "All me." He froze. I watched his expression twist from disbelief to horror. "How?" "Your password," I said simply. "The same one you used for chess." And then I stood, dropped the napkin onto the table, and walked away. When I got home that night, I deleted every fake profile, every message, every trace. The silence felt clean, like fresh air after a storm. I slept like a child for the first time in years. And when I woke up, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder if he'd call. I just smiled. Because for once, he was the one haunted by ghosts that didn't exist. I didn't hear from David for a while after that night. No texts, no calls, no unannounced visits. At first, it felt strange, like standing in a house that had always hummed with noise, now suddenly silent. I kept waiting for his name to flash on my screen. It didn't. A few days passed. Then a week. Then 2. It was peaceful. Almost unnervingly peaceful. I started sleeping through the night again. I cooked real meals instead of just coffee and toast. I went running by the lake in the mornings, something I used to love before I'd learned to walk on eggshells. I didn't realize how much space he had taken up in my head until it was empty again. And that emptiness wasn't loneliness. It was relief. Then, one morning, an email arrived. It was from him. Subject line, "Please read this." My stomach tightened. I almost deleted it. Almost. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I opened it. It was long, over 1,000 words. He started with an apology. The kind that isn't really an apology. The kind that says, "I'm sorry for what happened," instead of, "I'm sorry for what I did." He wrote about how what I'd done to him, the fake dates, the deception, had been ingenious. He said it proved I was the love of his life. I laughed out loud reading that. He said he'd stopped using dating apps because every time he met a new woman, he both feared and hoped it was me again. That he couldn't tell if he wanted to run or to beg for forgiveness. He said I had ruined him for other women. That now no one could surprise him the way I did. No one could challenge him like I had. I sat there, reading his words, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anything. Not rage. Not sadness. Not longing. Just nothing. Because I realized something in that moment. The person who once had the power to break me no longer existed. He was just another stranger sending words into the void. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. Let him talk to the silence. It suited him. Weeks turned into months. I kept moving forward. I started painting again, messy, abstract stuff that never left the canvas. I met new people, slowly, cautiously, learning how to trust without handing someone the whole map of my heart. And every once in a while, I'd still see his name pop up in my inbox. Each time, the tone changed. First, nostalgia. Then, guilt. Then, desperation. He wrote about therapy. About wanting closure. About how his therapist told him he needed forgiveness to move on. I knew what that meant. He didn't want my peace. He wanted his. And he wanted me to give it to him. So I didn't. Because forgiveness, when demanded, isn't healing. It's manipulation dressed up as redemption. He wasn't asking to make things right. He was asking me to help him sleep at night. And I had no interest in tucking him in. 2 years passed. I met someone new. His name was Daniel. He was quiet, grounded, and kind in the way that doesn't need to announce itself. The first time he touched my hand, I almost flinched. My body had grown used to tension, waiting for the next jab, the next cold look, the next test. But Daniel never tested me. He listened. He made space. And slowly, I let myself fill it. One evening, we were walking along the same waterfront cafe where David once waited for his phantom dates. The sun was setting, painting the water in soft gold and crimson. Daniel asked, "Have you ever been here before?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah," I said. "Once." I didn't explain. Some stories are better left as ghosts, the kind that fade quietly once they've served their purpose. But life has a funny way of looping back when you least expect it. Almost a year later, I received one last message from David. Short this time. No excuses, no explanations. Just, "I'm moving. Starting over. I hope you're happy." And for the first time, I believed he meant it. I sat there, reread it once, and smiled. Because I was. Looking back now, I sometimes think about the person I used to be, the girl who believed every compliment, who mistook intensity for love. The one who cried over a man's betrayal and thought revenge would fix the wound. It didn't fix it. But it did something better. It reminded me of who I was before he tried to rewrite me. Strong. Clever. Capable of loving deeply, but also capable of walking away. People always ask if I regret it. The fake profiles, the lies, the elaborate setup. And the truth? No. Because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. He taught me deceit. I taught him a consequence. And in that quiet equilibrium, I found peace. Sometimes, late at night, when my phone buzzes with some unknown number, I still think for half a second, could it be him? But then I smile. Because I know he's somewhere out there, hesitating before every message he sends, wondering if the woman on the other side is me again. And that's all the closure I'll ever need. It's been 8 years. 8 whole years since I last saw David. I've built an entirely new life, the kind I used to think only existed in movies or other people's stories. The kind where peace isn't loud, where love feels like a steady heartbeat instead of a storm. Daniel and I bought a little house outside the city, near the water. It's quiet here, birds in the morning, crickets at night. The kind of quiet that used to make me restless, now it feels like safety. Every morning, I drink my coffee on the porch and watch the sunrise. And sometimes, I think back to that other version of me, the one who cried on her kitchen floor, broken by a man's betrayal. She feels like another person entirely. Someone I used to know. I don't think about David much anymore. But when I do, it's never with longing. It's curiosity. Like rereading an old chapter just to make sure you learned the lesson right. And I did. Or at least, I thought I had. It started with a message request. I almost ignored it. It was from a name I didn't recognize, Lauren. The message preview said, "You don't know me, but I think we've both been through something similar." Normally, that kind of message screams spam. But something about the way it was written, calm, direct, made me open it. "Hi, Kate. I hope this isn't strange. I've been seeing someone named David for a few months now. I came across some old emails in his archive that mentioned your name. I think you might be his ex. I don't mean any harm by reaching out, I just want to understand something." My breath caught. 8 years. And there it was. His name, breaking through the silence like a ghost whispering through the walls. I sat there for a long time, staring at the message. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure I wanted to. I didn't want to reopen that door. Not when I'd locked it so carefully, buried it under years of healing. But the thing about ghosts is they don't need doors. They find their way in anyway. So the next morning, I wrote back. "Hi, Lauren. Yes, I knew David. A long time ago. What do you want to know?" Her reply came quickly. "I'm sorry to bother you. I think he's cheating on me. And something about the way he acts, it's like he's done this before. I found those emails, and one of them was from you. It was years ago. He never deleted it." I frowned. "What emails?" I typed. She sent screenshots. They were my messages. The ones I'd sent through the fake dating profiles. The ones where I had played a dozen women to teach him what it felt like to chase ghosts. And there they were, still sitting in his inbox. Untouched. Unread. Frozen in time. A strange chill went through me. Lauren continued. "He told me you were obsessed with him. That you made fake accounts to stalk him after he broke up with you. But reading those messages, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like something else. Like he's still scared of you. That made me laugh, not out loud, but quietly in disbelief. Scared of me. David. The man who once made me feel small enough to disappear. I didn't reply for a while. But later that night, lying in bed beside Daniel, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how David had kept those messages. All these years. Why? Was it guilt? Obsession? Some kind of reminder? Or maybe he just couldn't bring himself to delete the one thing that had ever outsmarted him. 2 days later, Lauren messaged again. He's meeting someone tonight. A woman from a dating site. I'm done with him, but I want to see it for myself. Would you come? At first, I almost laughed. Was she serious? Then I realized she wasn't asking for help with revenge. She was asking for closure. The same thing I once needed, too. And maybe, in a strange way, I owed that to her. To the next woman who got caught in his web. So I said yes. We met at a cafe near the river, the same one, ironically, where I'd watched him wait for those fake dates all those years ago. The air smelled of rain. Lauren was younger than me, early 30s, maybe. Nervous, but steady. We sat by the window, pretending to sip coffee while keeping our eyes on the entrance. At 7:05, he walked in. David. He looked older, of course, a little gray at the temples, still wearing that same smug composure that once fooled me into believing he was everything I'd ever wanted. And he was meeting someone. A tall brunette. He greeted her with that same rehearsed charm, the practiced warmth, the smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Lauren's face hardened. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. She just whispered, "There it is." And I realized she wasn't watching a man. She was watching a pattern. The same one that had broken me, now playing on repeat with someone new. We didn't confront him. There was no point. He would deny, manipulate, and rewrite. We just watched. For 5 minutes. 10. Long enough to know everything we needed to know. Then we stood up and left. Outside, the rain had started. Lauren turned to me and said, "Thank you." I asked for what? She smiled faintly. For showing me what survival looks like. Then she walked away. I stood there in the drizzle, watching her go, and it hit me. This was how the cycle ended. Not with revenge. Not with confrontation. But with someone finally choosing to walk away before they shattered. That night, I went home to Daniel, kissed him softly, and realized how far I'd come. David no longer haunted me. He was just a name buried under years of distance. A ghost who'd finally run out of places to hide. Sometimes, people ask if I ever forgave him. And the truth? No. Because forgiveness is overrated. What I found was something better. Indifference. The kind of indifference that doesn't need to prove anything. Doesn't need an audience. It just is. I used to think revenge was my victory. But now I know better. My real victory was peace. The kind that doesn't shake, doesn't shout, it just breathes. And as the years go by, every time I think of him, the man who thought he could rewrite me, I smile. Because I wrote the ending myself. And he'll never stop reading it. I used to think revenge was about balance, an equation that could make pain even. He hurt me, I hurt him, and maybe the universe would finally breathe again. But when I finally stopped creating fake profiles, stopped tracking his every move, and closed that last tab on my laptop, what filled the silence wasn't satisfaction. It was something else. Something heavier, quieter. It was peace. I didn't find it in watching him squirm or seeing his dates fail. I found it in the moment I realized I didn't need him to hurt anymore for me to be free. Because I had already hurt enough for both of us. After the breakup, he tried everything to reel me back in. The first message came 2 weeks later, a long, rambling email that began with, "I just want to talk." He called me his once-in-a-lifetime connection, said I had a way of seeing him like no one else ever did. He even called what I did to him ingenious. Ingenious. That word haunted me for days. It was the exact kind of twisted admiration that summed him up, how he could take cruelty, pain, and deception and turn them into compliments. He said I was the only one who could match him. The only one who could play his game. And maybe, in some dark, broken way, he was right. But I didn't reply. I didn't even open the next message he sent. Or the next. because by then, I understood what he was really saying. I miss controlling you. I miss being the center of your world. I miss the way you fought to prove your love. And I wasn't giving that to him again. I focused on myself for the first time in years. I started running in the mornings again, really running, not just jogging off anxiety. The air felt cleaner. The music in my ears wasn't a distraction anymore. It was a rhythm I could belong to. I started painting again, filling my apartment with soft blues and golds, colors I had once avoided because he said they made rooms too cold. Every small act of reclaiming my life felt like a rebellion. And slowly, the memory of David began to shrink. He went from being the center of every thought to being a shadow on the edge of my story. A lesson, not a scar. But life has a strange way of testing your peace. One morning, nearly a year later, I got a message from an unknown number. The preview on my screen said, "Kate, please. Just read this." I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. It was him. Again. He said therapy had changed him. That his counselor told him to seek closure from the people he'd hurt. That he was finally facing his mistakes and realizing how much pain he'd caused. He said he didn't want me back. He just wanted forgiveness. I read it twice. Slowly. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Not because of what he lost, but because I knew he'd never understand the kind of love he ruined, not truly. He'd never know what it's like to give yourself to someone without fear, without suspicion. He'd never know peace the way I had found it, quietly, on the other side of vengeance. So I didn't reply. Because forgiveness, for me, wasn't a gift I could give him. It was something I gave myself when I stopped needing him to feel pain. A few months later, I heard through mutual friends that he'd stopped online dating entirely. Apparently, every time he met a woman, he hesitated, afraid that it might be me behind the screen again. That made me smile. Not out of cruelty, but out of poetic symmetry. He taught me paranoia. I just let him live with his own lesson. Now, when people ask me about that time in my life, I tell them the truth, but not all of it. I tell them about the heartbreak, the gaslighting, the loneliness. But I also tell them about the nights I stayed up crafting my own kind of justice, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because it was the only way I could survive him. I tell them about how sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about taking back the pieces of yourself someone tried to break. And sometimes that means outsmarting the devil in his own game. Sometimes it means disappearing so completely from his world that he starts wondering if he ever knew you at all. That's what I became to David, a ghost, a memory, a whisper that wouldn't fade. He haunted me once. Now I haunt him. I still have the giant shell he gave me that day on the island. It sits on my bookshelf now, cracked at the edge, worn smooth from years of dust and time. When the light hits it just right, it glows a soft gold. Every time I see it, I don't think of him anymore. I think of myself. The girl who loved too hard, got burned, and still found her way out. Because that's what healing really is, not forgetting, not forgiving, but remembering who you were before someone convinced you that you were hard to love. And that's what I am now. Loved. Whole. Untouchable. And as for David, he'll probably keep sending messages into the void, hoping one day I'll respond. But all he'll ever get is silence. Because silence, for me, isn't absence anymore. It's closure. It's peace. It's power. And maybe that's the sweetest revenge of all.